this computer. There we go.
Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everyone from several continents today for the E-School of the French Infantry Sergeant. Marc Middleton is well known to most of us as an author of a series of books on French regulations and how it affects the various troops. And tonight he'll be specializing on the sergeant's role from day to day to weekly activities to how he'll be punished if he doesn't fulfill those duties and so on. I think you're going to find it very interesting and very detailed. So following the talk, if a couple of days from now you'd like to have a copy of the recording, send me an email. What we're asking is just a token $5 US, and then I will send you the complete video recording as well as a copy of the PowerPoint that you can see slowly, make notes from and so on to make sure that you caught all the details, because it is quite exhaustive. On that note, Marc, I did have a special comment that I wanted to make. One of our reenactors in North America, Rudy Segar, passed away just a couple of weeks ago. I met Rudy first as a member of the 3e de Ligne. Rudy and I were both grenadiers there. Rudy stayed with the 3e. I went on into the Imperial Guard, but we've been buddies ever since 2008. Rudy was happy to be both in Europe and in North America at events, always with a smile, always happily helping whatever tasks were needed, and he'll be sorely missed. So on that note, we'll let Marc begin, but I did want to say a farewell to Rudy. Marc?
Thank you very much, Victor. So everybody, welcome. Thanks again for popping in. Again, I will try, this is going to be in fairly large amount of details, so there will be breaks. I will be inviting questions at the end of each little section, and then there will be general questions again, or if you come up with a question during the presentation at the end. So sit down, take a bourbon, and see if you can keep up with it. It is quite detailed. If you haven't watched the other presentation, which is the E-School of the Corporal, that is still available, I believe.
Yes.
And it'll be a nice companion because the sergeants and the corporals actually do interact together. So it will be a nice companion with this particular presentation. So what are we going to look like? What are we going to look at today? So first of all, we're going to be looking at the functions of the infantry sergeant. Very briefly. Likewise, I will be very brief with regards to his place in the line of battle. That goes into more details in previous conferences we've done on the actual drill regulations. And then we'll start getting into the actual daily duties of the sergeant with the general duties. I'll be explaining afterwards his duties as a subdivision commander. I'll be explaining that as well a little bit later on. Then we'll look at the duties that he has to do in addition when his regiment is on the march or in a camp. We'll then look at what a sergeant has to do if he is detached from his unit with a bunch of men. So he could be sent off on a specific mission or maybe in a certain town. So he still has extra duties to do in this sense, because he then becomes defunct, the ultimate military commander of that particular detachment. We will then be looking at occasional roles, punctual roles that he has to fill in. And then finally, at the end of it, how to punish the sergeant, the procedures to punish a lackluster sergeant or a criminally minded one. So without further ado, let's take a look at his function. So the sergeant is categorized as a sous-officier, that's a non-commissioned officer, and he is a part of the first class of sous-officier. So the corporal at this time, there is a lot of debate is the corporal an NCO or not? Yes, he is. And yes, he is. He's the lowest class. The sergeant is a first class NCO in the French army at this point. He is in charge of a subdivision, so a subdivision, which is actually made up of 2 escouades. An escouade is a mess, about 12 to 15 soldiers, sometimes more, rarely less. The escouades are headed by corporals, so that means 2 corporals report to 1 sergeant, and the sergeant himself reports to the sergeant major of the company and also to the officers on certain occasions. When he is on guard duty, the sergeant, he commands posts manned by 12 to 18 privates and a corporal, or he commands posts that have 18 to 24 privates and 2 corporals. Anything above that is an officer. No drummers are under the orders of any sergeant except if the drummer and the sergeant happen to be in the garde de police, that's the guard house of the garrison or the camp, in which case the sergeant does command the drummer to beat the different drum rolls for the day in order for the soldiers to know when to drill, when to eat, when to pick up food, when to get up, and when to go to bed. Naturally, and that hasn't changed still to these days, the sergeant is exempted from all and any fatigue duties. When he is in garrison, he lodges, sleeps, and eats with other sergeants in the company. So that's the famous sergeant's mess that you still get now in the modern French army, and I know in the British army there's sergeant mess, so probably in the other armies as well. However, once on campaign, he lodges, sleeps, and eats with the soldiers of his subdivision. Okay, he does not stay apart with other sergeants. It's purely when he is in a garrison town. And leading straight into what we're going to see afterwards, the sergeant has 2 main functions above all to fulfill. That is supervising the men under his command and making sure they do their duty, do their job. Briefly, I'll just cite the drill regulation of 1791 with regards to the sergeant. So within a company, you have 1 sergeant major, 1 fourrier, so a quartermaster. You have 4 sergeants and 8 corporals. So where do the 4 sergeants stand when in a line of battle? The first sergeant stands in the 3rd rank behind the captain. He also acts as the right-hand guide of his platoon, and he is called the sous-officier de remplacement, literally translated covering NCO, because he covers the captain. Whenever the captain leaves his place in the 1st rank, his role is to step up and occupy that space, so that when there are any movements of the battalion, the space occupied normally by the platoon captain is kept safe by sergeant, and when the captain comes back, he steps back into the 3rd rank. The 2nd senior sergeant of the platoon stands to the left of the 2nd section. So basically he stands to the extreme left of the platoon when it's in line in the supernumerary rank. All other sergeants will be in the supernumerary rank by now. The 3rd sergeant stands on the left of 1st section, and the 4th junior-most sergeant stands on the right of 1st section. Okay, and this is a direct extract from the règlement of concerning the drill and maneuver of the French infantry. During battle, the roles of the sergeants within the supernumerary rank is to keep an eye on the soldiers and make sure that they do their duty promptly. Smack maybe a few heads if they're not awake or a bit lackluster, and make sure that the men don't break off. And they are, of course, in the supernumerary rank with the lieutenant and with the sub-lieutenant and the sergeant major at the same time. That's all you'll get from drill on this presentation. There are other presentations that go into this into much more detail. So what does the sergeant actually do? Remember, his main duties are supervision and making sure the men do their duties. So supervision basically is he's continually watching over the corporals of the subdivision. He always has them close to his chest. He always makes sure that they do their own jobs promptly, so that he doesn't get in trouble with the sergeant major, and that the men are always as they are supposed to turn out for the various duties of the day. With regard to duty, there are many duties that a sergeant can be called to do. One of them is the sergent de semaine. We will be looking at this a bit later on. sergeant de garde, the ronde de détachement, etc. What we won't be looking at is another duty that he has, which is sergeant instructeur, instructor sergeant, so drill sergeant, and the sous-officier de remplacement, d'encadrement, the guide de gauche, the guide de droite. These are all positions that are occupied by a sergeant, but within a battalion when the battalion drills or goes into battle. So as I said, we won't be looking at this. There are other presentations that can detail this in much more detail. What we will be looking at a bit later on would be sergeant de semaine, sergeant de garde, de ronde, and when he's in a detachment. So to summarize, if you only had 5 minutes to watch this presentation, to summarize, a sergeant's duty is to consist of carrying out the orders he receives and enforcing all regulations and supervising the corporals. That's his mission. As a subdivisional commander, so a sergeant is in charge of 2 escouades. Each escouade has a corporal at their head. There are 4 sergeants, 8 corporals. These 2 escouades together, they're called subdivision, a subdivision, and he is their de facto commander. So what does he have to do? Well, he has to check and teach his corporals how to command men, because these corporals one day will be sergeants. And whilst they're corporal, they're going to have to be obeyed. So for the new ones, he just has to teach them how to get the men to obey them, teach them the right terms, etc. So there's a little bit of training going on there. And he makes sure in garrison that in the men's rooms that they are always clean, and the items that are put at their disposal, tables, benches, the beds, the straw mattresses, the shelves, anything of that nature, even the bread cutting board has to be in good condition. It's supposed to last a certain time, and of course, if it doesn't, they're liable to pay for it from their pockets. In camp, it's slightly different because there are no rooms, there are tents, and he has to do exactly the same, but he just needs to make sure that the area covered by his subdivision is always clean. So he makes sure the streets is cleaned of mess and straw, and the insides of the tents are clean, well ordered, etc., and that the men don't do silly things in them, of course. Checks, always doing checks. He watches over the men's appearance and hygiene. He's supposed to make sure the corporals do this. The corporals are theoretically each morning supposed to make sure the men wash their faces, their hands, shave, etc. So he watches to make sure that that's being done. And likewise, he does the same for the uniforms, the weapons, etc. So he just supervises and makes sure the corporals are doing their job at checking their men's cleanliness and their equipment's cleanliness. He carries out the roll call in the presence of the sergeant major and the officers. He holds a little book which lists the men's linen and shoes. So linen, it's the shirts, drawers, and shoes. So he's in charge to make sure that this linen is being washed, the new linen has arrived, and that the soldiers have always clean linen on them, or that they're sending them to the washerwomen to make sure they get treated. Finally, he is present whenever any information is written in his men's service books. Each French soldier had a little service book which detailed his entire military career. It's a bit like an ID book. Soldiers at this time, a lot of people generally at this time could not read. Sergeants must read, just like corporals must be able to read. And whenever the fourrier, the quartermaster, writes anything in the book, so what do we write in the book? Equipment that you've received, your pay gets noted. It's a pay book as well. Whenever anything is inscribed into this book, the sergeant of that man must be present. General supervision, again, weapons and leatherworks. He makes sure they're always as clean as possible in all situations. Some situations probably they are easier to maintain a certain whiteness to the belts than others, but he has to make sure that they are kept clean. He gets the men to clean and beat their clothes before lying them out on the beds every week, and that's just before the section officer's inspection. So every week, the section officer in a garrison will come down and visit the rooms, make sure they're clean, and at this point, you're lying your clothes out on the bed so that he can see that you're taking care of your uniform. Food money. This is the corporals that sort out the food money. They're in charge of the messes, but he has to make sure that the corporals use this money in, how can I put this, in a sensible manner. This must not be drink money. This is for food. and he gives his section officer and the company sergeant major, he keeps him abreast of everything and anything that is happening inside the subdivision. And he talks to them informally. It's not a written report, it's a verbal report. Section officers is very simple. 2 sergeants would be responsible to the lieutenant, and 2 sergeants would be directly responsible to the sub-lieutenants. This is what the section commander is. French platoons are always divided into 2 sections. Okay, oh, there we go. Other things that the sergeant has to watch out for is hair cutting. He has to make sure that his men are shaved at all times. He has to make sure that their hair gets cut every time that they need it. That's how it's stated in the regulations. However, every 8 days, if any men that belong to a sergeant are either in prison for whatever offense or in hospital because they're sick or injured, he has to make sure that they also get shaved every 8 days. When the company needs to be assembled, the sergeant has to double up his vigilance and make sure that his corporals are vigilant on all details and cleanliness of the men and their kits. Anytime the company assembles itself, that's usually going to involve officers being around. Naturally, they will start inspecting the men, making sure everything is clean and up to standards, in which case he needs to make sure that his men are, otherwise it's going to fall on his back if anything goes wrong, naturally. If a sergeant has to leave his garrison or his unit for any reason, or if he's given leave to go on holiday, he must be replaced by the other sergeant of the section. So that sergeant will not only have his own subdivisions to run, but he'll have the other 2 of his colleagues who's gone off on holiday. However, the company captain, if he thinks the other sergeant left is not capable of doing that job, he can then not promote, but he can put in charge of that of the absent sergeant subdivision the most experienced corporal. So it's down to the company captain. If the other sergeant is capable, he just lets that sergeant run the 2 subdivisions. If not, within the subdivision with the missing sergeant, he gets a corporal to carry out all the duties that the sergeant is supposed to do. And of course, that corporal will also have to carry out his duties of corporal. That's the general everyday observations and supervisions that he has to do. However, on the march, there are extra things he has to do as well. For starters, he carries the grand bidon de vinaigre. The bidon is basically a big tin, like a big cauldron camp kettle, and it's full of vinegar. And he is in charge of that vinegar being good for purifying water, for cleaning, that sort of stuff. So he's in charge of carrying that. You thought sergeants didn't carry anything? Nope, they're in charge of something. He also makes sure that while on the march, he must continue to enforce standards in terms of kits, always make sure that the best possible state. When they go through towns or stay in towns, he visits the lodgings of his men in order to collect any and all grievances. So when you arrive at a town, at a village, and you're going to spend the night or any period of time there, you would normally get the mayor who would distribute billets out. Once the men are all in their billets, the sergeants go around, visit all their men, and if there's a problem, they take the grievance and take it to the attention of the mayor for him to sort out. In said village or town, he does not sleep or lodge with the soldiers. He has his own room. If one of the men on the march is absent from roll call, first thing he does goes to visit his lodgings. Maybe the guy's overslept, maybe the guy's sick, but that's the first place you go and see. If he's not there, you get you try and find out why. Is there any reason why he's absent? Maybe ask his colleagues, his room colleagues, or his section colleagues, or his mess colleagues. And once he's ascertained as much information as possible, he immediately and promptly brings this to the attention of the men. That is the weekly duty officer. The officers, there's always a weekly duty officer, rotates every week. So then that's when probably the guy becomes a deserter. In camp, slightly different as well. Sergeants take command of the tents where they lodge and they sleep with the soldiers. So they don't have their own, there isn't a tent full of sergeants on a camp. The sergeant basically decides, I'll sleep here in this tent, and he automatically takes command of that particular tent within his subdivision. When they arrive in the camp, and upon being ordered to do so, this is not something he does off his own back. It is a sergeant that places the stack of arms in the desired location. So when a company arrives in a camp, there will be a street for with tents either side of the street. That's for the sergeants, the corporals, and the privates. And at the end of this street, on the side of the street where the battalion is supposed to form, all the men stack in one single pile their arms. So he waits until he's ordered to do so. The officer tells him, make sure the men pile their arms there, and then he gets the men to pile their arms together. And when they're on guard duty in camp, the sergeants are responsible for rising and lowering the colors. Sometimes, occasionally, sergeants will need to take a bunch of men and go off and do a particular mission. We call this en détachement, as a detachment. When a sergeant knows he has to take his men en détachement, the first thing he does before they move out is make sure that all the men are supposed to have the kit that they have supposed to have with them. They must also have their military booklets, their service booklets with them, food ration distributed, and he must make sure there are no outstanding grievances from the soldiers before going. Why? Simply the grievance could be, I don't have shoes, my shoes are bad, I haven't been given, my uniform is in such a state because such and such a thing happened. He has to sort everything out before he goes out on his mission. And of course, he expects the weapons, the clothing, and especially the footwear. Once they arrive at their designated position, he makes sure that the men take up as smallest amount of space as possible, and he himself places himself in the center. Like that, he's not too far away from a bunch of his men compared to another. He's in the center. He controls the position. He establishes his guardhouse. Even if he doesn't have a building or anything, he establishes an area which will be considered the guardhouse. And he also establishes as many guard posts as necessary to guarantee his detachment's security. And of course, he indicates to all his men the area where they are to assemble in case of alarm. If he doesn't do that, when the alarm comes, it's going to be absolute chaos. Should the enemy be nearby, he has to do a couple of other things. He carries out a recon of the surrounding area. He must make note of any fords, passages, or paths that the enemy may use. Take that into consideration when he sets up his defense perimeter. He establishes his line of retreat in case he comes across an enemy which is bigger or stronger than him. So a line that he can fall back on. And he takes any and all measures necessary, or that he esteems necessary, for the defense of his position. This can include building abattis, creating barricades, digging ditches, entrenchments, etc. And the regulations clearly state, if necessary, he has the power to requisition the local people to come and give him a hand in this. And if the enemy is particularly close, he has to forbid his men from getting undressed at night. So everybody sleeps in their uniform, and of course, no one leaves their posts. Extra little bit of information I thought that was interesting. In any and all cases, he makes sure that his men are a bit, not a lot spread out, is what I'm trying to get at. That they live harmoniously with the locals. You don't want the locals to get on their bad side. You might need them to dig that ditch later on. They must respect property, and his men must be present at all roll calls, and he must make sure rations are distributed regularly. He must visit the men's lodging. He must conduct inspections. He must check his posts and sentries. He must take out patrols as necessary and give his daily orders every morning. And he decides where to, that is retreat, the hour it's beaten, depending on the season. So he starts to take on de facto the role of an officer, being that he's the most high-ranking person there. So he's taking on extra duties, maybe even preparing himself to become an officer one day. What's also very interesting is the note about living harmoniously with the locals and respecting property. We know the Napoleonic French army and revolutionary armies were not always, how can I say this, so gentle with the people that they visited for reasons that most of us know. They're living off the land. So that means probably breaking into the odd farm and stealing the odd chicken, and that's okay. Up until now, are there any questions about what we've seen?
I think we're good to go on.
We're good to go on. In that case, we'll carry on. Now we're going to talk about the occasional roles. So you know what the sergeant's doing every day. Now you're going to look at the extra bits he has to do. So the first thing is sergent de semaine, literally translated as sergeant of the week. This is what we would translate probably as weekly duty sergeant. So remember, in a company, there are 4 sergeants. This is rotated every week. So every week, one of those sergeants will be the duty sergeant. So it means if you're a sergeant, you know that 1 week out of 4, you're on duty. What does this duty sergeant actually do? Well, he's responsible to the officier de semaine. That's the weekly duty officer. So there are 2 officers, the sub-lieutenant and the lieutenant. They rotate every week to be the duty officer. So he's responsible to that particular man on that week, and he gives them verbal reports, or as always. Yet he is still also has to give reports to the sergeant major, and he has to assist and supplement him with regards to the day's service. So if there's extra work to be done, we call on the sergent de semaine to be the one who carries this out. He replaces the caporal de semaine, the weekly duty corporal, when the latter is absent. Again, if in the worst case scenario, you're a sergeant, your other sergeant in your subdivision is away, so you have to do his job. It's also your turn to be the sergent de semaine, so you've got that job to do. And the corporal, the caporal de semaine has gone off this week as well on holiday, so you have to do his job as well. So it can get, that's the most extreme situation that you could find yourself in this case. And of course, the sergent de semaine cannot leave the barracks or the camp without first having agreed it with 2 people, the caporal de semaine and also with the sergent de semaine. And before you even get to the officier de semaine, before you even get to the officier de semaine, you need to make sure with the caporal de semaine you sort out who is doing what job in your absence. So, sergent de semaine, each morning, for that week, after a morning roll call, so you do your morning roll call of your own subdivision, you then collect all the roll calls from your other colleague sergeants. You establish a written list containing the names and room numbers of the absent soldiers, and you bring this to the commander of the guardhouse. That's the first thing you do. And if necessary, if the sergeant major decides to have an extra bit of lie-in, he'll get you to do the roll calls in his stead. Your next duty as a sergent de semaine involves the guard of a garrison. So the guard of a garrison changes every 24 hours. So when the new guard comes in place at 9:30, the sergent de semaine carries out the inspection of the men of the new guard. So it's not necessarily men within his own subdivision. It could be a combination of different men from different subdivisions of the company, but it's this sergeant that has to check them all over. And during the inspection, he is accompanied by the caporal de semaine, who provides him the lists of any absent soldiers that are supposed to be on guard duty and the reason for their absence. At 10:30 a.m., when when the garrison drum rolls 3 drum rolls, he leads the men of the guard to the officier de semaine for his own inspection. During this inspection, he is present also, and he carries a musket without a bayonet. He carries his saber, but he does not carry his cartridge box, his giberne. Okay, why? Simply so that the officier de semaine, just by looking, he can instantly see if a sergeant is supposed to be part of the new guard, in which case he'll be equipped with a cartridge box. And he knows instantly that this sergeant is the sergeant de semaine. He's not going out because he doesn't have a cartridge box. So it's easy identification. Le cercle, every morning you have what's called le cercle, which means a circle. The cercle d'ordre is basically the officers, the sergeant major, and the sergeant and caporal de semaine. They come together and they will detail the day's duty. And at night, they'll have another one to detail the following mornings. So he takes part, the sergeant de semaine, in this cercle. This is not only will you be given the duty of the day, you'll also be giving the passwords of the day and that sort of thing. So it's quite an important position. You have to go and transmit this to the rest of the company. And as the new guard leaves, the sergeant de semaine stays, because when the old guard returns, he makes sure that the old guard who have loaded muskets extract that load from their barrels with a worm, and they have to do this in his presence. And then they have to hand the powder in. You don't leave the soldiers take powder into the barrack rooms. Other duties that the sergeant de semaine must carry out: he must carry out the inspections of the men attached to drill or fatigue duties. So any men that have drill duties, he carries out the inspection to make sure they're correctly dressed. Any men who have to go and work, maybe in the kitchens, maybe there are things to repair, etc. That's the sergeant de semaine to make sure, he makes sure that they are properly attired, clean for the work that they're about to do. And it is the caporal de semaine that sends the different detachments, fatigue or drill detachments, to him for this inspection. He also oversees weekly. So once when you're the duty sergeant, you must also make sure that the corridors and rooms are clean. Before the weekly inspection by the officer, you must also undertake the inspection of the rooms. You will do this with the caporal de semaine because he's supposed to have prepped everything before you. And at the appointed time of the inspection, he accompanies the officier de semaine, who does the inspection of the barrack rooms. So you've had the caporal de semaine who's checked it. You've had the sergeant de semaine who's checked it. By the time it gets to the officier de semaine, everything should be perfect. Another occasional role is the sergeant de police, so the sergeant in the guardhouse. General responsibilities for this sergeant is he raises and lowers the colors. He makes sure that the guardhouse drummer beats the different signals of the military day at the appointed times. He is in charge of the supervision of the prisoners or men that are consigned to the guardhouse. So any men who's punished, he's in charge of keeping an eye on them while they're in the guardhouse. He's also responsible for the cleanliness of the communal squares and passages. So the sergeant de semaine is in charge of the corridors and corridors of the rooms and the rooms themselves. But the communal area, the drill square, the company square, any common passages, that's the sergeant de police who is responsible of their cleanliness. And he's also responsible for the latrines, the prison cells, etc. Anything that is common or attached to the guardhouse, he is in charge of its cleanliness. If necessary, and only when he's requisitioned by either military officer or it could be a civil authority, he goes forth with his guard in order to re-establish order and calm. Not all the soldiers, a guardhouse, at this time, there's no police in the sense as we know it. So the military personnel of a garrison serve also as a police force. So if there's I don't know, a strike or any sort of civil disobedience going on in the town, the civil authorities would get hold of the military guardhouse, and the guardhouse, the soldiers in the guardhouse would go out and basically quell any rebellion or establish any order once more in the town. And they're also a bit like military police. They have to do the same within the garrison. Again, we have more supervision. Sergeants do a lot of supervision, so they have to forbid any NCO or private from leaving the camp or the barracks if they are not in a satisfactory state of cleanliness and or the designated orders of dress. If I talk about reenactment, Napoleonic reenactment, a lot of the times it is the individual person who decides how he will dress. This is not how it happens in the Napoleonic army. It's very simple. Every morning at the Cercle d'Ordre, the company officer will receive orders from the battalion commander, who will receive orders from his colonel, the regimental commander, and it is this order that establishes this is what the men wear when they're off duty, this is what they will wear when they do such and such a job, this is what they wear when they go and do drill, this is what they wear when they go out of town, and this is what they wear when they're in service. This is posted in the guard room, so every time a soldier wants to go out, the sergeant de police makes sure, one, he's shaved, he's clean, he's presentable, and he wears the correct uniform. If he is not in the correct uniform, he gets sent back to his room to correct his dress, in essence. He also makes sure that if any outsiders want to come into the camp or into the barrack, he checks the reason. He interviews the person. He tries to find out, does this person have a good reason to be in here? If there is a good reason for this outsider to come in, he always makes sure a corporal or a soldier accompanies this person at all times within the barracks or within camp. When to, so la retraite, when it's time for the garrison to close the doors, when it's time for the soldiers to all come back in from outside, he closes the barracks doors and he gets all his men to wear, at that point onwards, the bonnet de police, no longer the shako for the night's duty. He is also in charge of closing all the canteens. So any cantina that's set up within the garrison, the sergeant de police, once to two has been beaten, goes around and says, closing time now, get everybody out, everybody has to go to bed. And he expulses, of course, any soldiers that are there. If the soldiers are too drunk and don't want to go, if they resist, in that case, he arrests them and sticks them in the guardhouse for the night. And every morning he signs the guardhouse register. So in essence, the register is who's come in, who's come out, what have we seen, etc. It's like a diary. And he submits it to the adjudant de semaine, so the weekly duty adjutant, at 8 o'clock every morning, so that this goes up to the colonel or battalion level for the Cercle d'Ordre. It's for them to get a picture of what's gone on during the night so that they can give nice, clean orders for the following day if it's something that's necessary. During the night, again, 24 hours, you're going to have to be doing a little bit of guard duty during the night. He carries out checks around the barracks, around the camp, make sure everyone's in the room sleeping, no one's out, everything's calm. He controls any and all persons that enter the barrack or the camp after evening roll call. And he notes the time when NCOs, privates return to the barrack and camp after la retraite. So after Tutu is beating, anybody who comes after Tutu is late. So it gets put down in the register. And when you go out, of course, as an NCO or a soldier, you have a little paper that allows you to go out, a little note from the officer saying, I authorize you to go out. Some of these are temporary, which could just be for the night. Some of these could be permanent, which this person is authorized systematically to go out, etc. Whenever the person's come back, he takes these papers off them, and he keeps the temporary ones when they expire, but he returns, gives the paper back to the person if it is a permanent authorization paper. Of course, any NCO or soldier that is drunk, he locks them up and he returns them to their respective companies in the morning. And the morning routine for the sergeant de police, billet de visite. So this is basically a little paper that is handed over from the sergeant's roll call, just to say which men are sick. So you get a little billet de visite, and he gives the sergeant de police gives this to the surgeon, so that the surgeon knows this morning I have 1, 2, 3, 4 X amount of people to go and visit, and they're in this room, and it's this guy's name. Every morning as well, the sergeant de police submits a report to the adjudant sous-officier, so a little bit like a warrant officer in our modern armies. And on this list are the names of any NCOs or privates that have been locked up for drunkenness or any other behavior. That then gets dealt with at company and or battalion regimental level. Another occasional duty is the sergeant de ronde. So a ronde, what is a ronde to be exact? Well, a ronde is a way for a sergeant who is commanded to do so. Again, sergeants don't do these things off their their own will. They have to be commanded to do so. It's a way for the sergeant to check up on sentries that are posted around a perimeter. Usually happens during the night, just to make sure they're not sleeping and that they're in the right area and that they're awake. So how does this happen? Well, the sergeant that is designated de ronde, he must follow a specific path, okay? He can't just think, I'll go this way, or there's a shortcut, I'll go this way. No, he's given a specific path to follow. And before he goes out, he takes note of the mot d'ordre and the mot de ralliement from the command of the post where the ronde starts. Mot d'ordre, literally translated word of order. Mot de ralliement, rallying word. These are the passwords, basically. The way a password works, there are two parts to the password. In order for both people to be okay when you do a check, both people need to know their part of the password. There'll be an explanation how this happens in situ a little bit later on. Once he has got the passwords, once he knows what path to tread for his ronde, the sergeant de ronde will also take tokens called marron, which is the French word for both the color, brown, and for chestnut. The little tokens, and on it is a number. So, for example, if he has number 2, this could mean this is the second ronde of the night. He takes these with him. Why? Because at a designated point, or it could be several designated points, so we'll give him several of these marrons. When he gets there, there will be a tin box. Within this tin box, he drops the marron inside, and he signs a register. He signs directly with his signature directly underneath the previous ronde. In the morning, the boxes are collected. We empty the boxes. Okay, we were supposed to have 5 rondes last night because they were quite close to the enemy. So let's check. Marron number 1 is here. Number 2 is here. 4 and 5 are here. Where's marron number 3? And of course, there's no good. The guy's signature is not on there. So you know, whoever was supposed to be in charge of that ronde number 3 has not, for some reason, dropped the marron in there. So it could mean maybe he did decide to take that shortcut. You'd have to call him in and have a chat. So that's what the marron is supposed to be for, to control that a ronde has taken place and has gone to a certain place within that circuit. Whilst you're on the ronde, so you're going about on your ronde, if you see anything that threatens the security of the garrison, you must warn any and all the posts that are closest to you, and afterwards go to inform the garrison commander. So if you find something that's very, very threatening, on the way back, if you cross 2 or 3 posts, you advise them, but your mission is to get back and advise the garrison commander ASAP. If there is any mischief, maybe local villagers have got into a bar fight or whatever, in that case, because the military also serves as a police, you advise the nearest post, there's a bit of a ruckus between 2 drunk guys at the Boar's Head. In that case, the commander of that post will send his guard to sort it out. If you find any sentry at fault during this round, this is why you've gone out, to make sure the sentries are doing their job. You make a note of it and you will advise the commander, the sentry's commander. So you find out what post he belongs to, and you advise the commander that this guy was sleeping, or this guy was sitting down, or this guy was, I don't know, too far away from his post. But what happens, because it's not just one guy that goes around, you can maybe have 2 guys going around and maybe from the opposite directions. So what happens when 2 rondes meet together? And this is where you will see how the mot d'ordre and mot de ralliement work. So the first sergeant of the ronde that spots the other will shout qui vive, who lives, or to a better translation, who goes there. And the other one must respond ronde or ronde major. The ronde major is something we'll explain a little bit afterwards, but basically it's like a super ronde. We'll imagine that the sergeant in this case responded ronde. So once you've got the qui vive ronde, the lower ranked man gives the mot d'ordre, and the other one must give the mot de ralliement. For example, if the mot d'ordre is Masséna and the mot de ralliement is Marengo, In that case, the lower ranking of the two men, not in rank as in sergeant, but probably the one who's got least experience, who's been sergeant the less amount of times, he will say Masena, and the other one must answer Marengo. If either one doesn't give the right word, you arrest him, and then you take him to the nearest post. If both sergeants happen to have the same length of service as sergeant, then it is the man with the lowest ranking regiment that gives the mot d'ordre. If the rank and the regiment are the same, then in that case it's the man who shouted qui vive that will give the mot d'ordre. And if one of the two is the ronde major, automatically it's not the ronde major that gives the word, it's the ronde. So far so good. That's the occasional duties. Just one more section to do it. That's how to punish a sergeant. So if those of you who were here for the corporals section of how to punish a corporal, you will find great similarities between the two, but let's go over it anyway for those who weren't. So how do you punish a sergeant? Two offenses. We have minor offenses and we have serious offenses. So what's a minor offense? A minor offense is breaches of dress, either personal or by subordinates. Hence why, as a sergeant, you're always making sure your men are in the right dress, because yeah, they'll get in trouble if they decide to wear mittens when the officer has clearly said mittens are not permitted, but you will also probably get in trouble because you haven't spotted it. So what happens? Very simple. The sergeant is consigned to quarters. Okay. When they are consigned to quarters, and for minor offenses, they are relieved of all duties and are given bread and water and docked part of their pay. No, sorry, that's for serious one. I beg your pardon. Consigned to quarters is they are relieved from all duties except exterior duties if specifically called upon, and they drill with the prisoners and they are docked part of the pay. So they can be called upon to do exterior duties if necessary, if we don't have the manpower, and they have to continue drilling, so they do come out and do a little bit of exercise. It's the serious offenses, serious breach of discipline or service, where you're put in the guardhouse or you're put in prison. And in that case, you don't do any duties, you're relieved, and you're only given bread and water, and you're docked part of your pay as well. They are not to be put in cells, except if they have committed an offense that calls for a military tribunal to statute on him. In this case, they are put in the cell, bread and water, and the extra pay is given to the company. So the extra sergeant's pay gets put straight into company funds. But otherwise, they're either in the regimental prison or they're in guardhouses. You don't put them in cells. Of course, for those of you who are here for the corporal's one, any and all punishments, no matter how minor or major, gets written into the company's punishment book. So let's look a bit, we've seen the general, the basics. Let's have a look at the administrative sanctions. So there are two sorts of sanctions that you can give out to a sergeant. You can either suspend them temporarily or you can casser. Casser literally means to break. This is to strip them of the rank and bring them back down to corporal. So if you want to casser a sergeant, you want to strip them of rank, he gets downgraded to a corporal. The corporal that he replaces automatically becomes sergeant. That's how it works. It is possible for a sergeant to be cassé directly down to private. It is possible. And in this case, the tribunal or the colonel has to decide whether he becomes private with loss of service position or whether he retains his service position. So if he keeps his service position, it means he remains within his company, and the years that he's built up doing this, he keeps, it stays on his military record. If he loses it, then automatically he becomes the newest private on the company's list. So by service position, it's basically, there's a control within the books to find out how many years the men have served within the unit. In this case, a sergeant downgraded to private with loss of service position, in essence, you're telling him the 5 years you've been here, mate, don't stand for anything. You're starting at zero again. This is going to affect his career in the long term, because in terms of years of service, it's like starting again. So this is quite a grave thing to do to a sergeant. He can be downgraded such within his company, or more likely transferred to another company. For suspensions, when you don't think that stripping the sergeant of his rank is necessary, but he does need to be suspended for the fault that he's done. While they're suspended, the sergeants, like corporals, continue to wear their rank insignia. Suspended sergeants do the duty of a corporal, and the corporal who replaces them does the duty of the sergeant. The sergeant's extra pay, okay, so let's imagine that 1/3 is the soldier's pay, an extra third is the corporal's pay, and that last third is your sergeant's pay. Well, 1/3 will go, or your sergeant's pay, that 1/3 goes to the corporal who's replacing you. Well, half of it goes to the corporal and the other half goes to the company funds. So you're in essence only pocketing a corporal's pay during this suspension. So you're being penalized also financially. Who can do what? Not every officer has the right to do any sort of punishment or all punishments to a sergeant, or to carry out any of the sanctions we've just seen. So I've tried to make it as simple as possible. Lieutenants and sous-lieutenants, so the sub-lieutenants, their power only is limited to consigning sergeants and corporals, or to put them in a holding cell. That's as far as they can go. The captains of a company can suspend sergeants like corporals from their functions, and the sergeant can put the captains can put their own sergeants in prison, but a sergeant cannot put the sergeants of another company into prison. Colonels and superior officers of the regiment, the major, etc., they have the right to do all that you've seen and strip ranks of sergeants. When a lieutenant is in charge of a company, he has the power, not only has he got the power to consign or put sergeants in the holding cell, but he does have automatically the power to put his sergeants into prison. So, as you can see, the ultimate punishment of cassie, stripping the rank from sergeants, this can only be called upon by the colonel, so the guy who's in charge of the regiment, or the battalion commander, who's also a senior officer of the regiment, or the major. Once this has been decided, once the punishment has been decided, what do we do? Well, for suspensions, these are, once they've been decided, these are announced at the regimental and company cercle d'ordre, so the little meeting, if we can call it that, with the officers, with the sergeant de semaine, the sergeant major, and the caporal de semaine. It's announced. This has been decided. This is the suspension. This man, this long, and it is always within the regimental punishment book. It's always written how long the punishment is supposed to last for and the reasons behind it. For cassie, stripping the rank, this is announced before the entire company. This is not just the meeting between the brass and the senior NCOs. This is the entire company. And there is actually a passage. I've put corporal here, but you have to replace it with sergeant. So the sergeant that you are stripping of rank, you're downgrading him. He's marched down before the head of all his friends, all his colleagues. And the officer in charge of downgrading him draws his sword and announces in a loud voice, I will do the translation of what's written, bearing in mind that this is the regulations that were written before the revolution, so they still talk about the king, but this was still carried out within the revolutionary and imperial period. So just replace roi with empereur, depending on what period you reenact. But by the king's authority, NCOs, corporals, and soldiers, you will no longer recognize such and such a person as sergeant, being that he has merited by his misconduct to be taken down to such and such a rank, having done such and such a fault. Once this declaration has been made, the sergeant or the corporal, it works for both, are immediately in front of everyone stripped of their ranks and put back into, stripped of their rank insignia and put into the company. Again, I insist, all details of all punishments, no matter how minor and how serious, are systematically written in the regimental punishment book. We have come to the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I have left, for those of you who are curious, to go and find all this information, all the different regulations, decrees, and laws governing the sergeants and what they have to do. Just a little call out, if you think I deserve a beer after all this, your kind donations will be gladly accepted and gladly spent in beer and or anything else on the below mentioned PayPal address. I will take any questions or any remarks at this point now.
Thank you, Mark. No, the floor is open if you want to unmute your mic. What question? There was a question asking about general punishment for soldiers in the French army. I don't know. I don't recall who was asking that question.
As in privates, what happened to them?
Exactly.
Again, it depends if it's a minor or a serious offense, but leaving the major offense, the serious offenses aside, in which case that does necessitate tribunals, etc. Simple minor offenses that could lead to simple soldiers. They talk about the standard one is you take off a gaiter. I think it's the right one. You take the right gaiter off and you say how long he has to walk around with just his left gaiter. Again, easy identifications. When you need to organize a fatigue duty and you need to instantly spot who's punished, you can see because there's a silly chap walking around with one gaiter, so he must be punished. Another one they also talk about is he has to wear, when he has to wear his uniform for duty, his blue coat, he wears it but turned inside out. So there's a couple of things there really for privates. It's a combination of humiliation, because you do look a right pillock if I use British English with one gaiter less or with your coat inside out, and also easy identification to know who's punished within the soldiers. Who punishes them? Depending on how minor it is, it can be the corporal. Extra fatigue duties count as well. It can be the sergeant, it can be the sergeant major, it could be the officers. For anything serious, again, the officers are limited by their rank, and anything very serious, of course, goes to a tribunal. Any soldier that's drunk, that's very easy punishment. That's guardhouse, and when you come back, probably you'll take his gaiter off as well for that. Maybe even get his gaiter off and turn his coat inside out. I hope that answers the question.
Hey, Mark, this is Arden, Texas, and my son Seth. We were chatting with Rob in Brisbane, but is there some of the NCO duties, is there some that are like better than others? I mean, you're saying they rotated every week, like, being the, what do you say, our NCO in charge of the regiment for the week. I'm not using the right words, right?
Yeah. I understand what you mean. Don't worry.
But is there one job's like, yes, I want that job, or, ooh, you got that job. How did you get it? I mean, how did you ingrace yourself to the officers to get that job? Or like, I love that job, or, oh, you lucky guy, or like, ooh, that one sucked.
The sergeant de semaine, the weekly duty sergeant, that's not a, how can I say this? It's not a choice to do it. You're going to do it. Every week this rotates. There are 4 of you, so 1 week out of 4 you are duty sergeant.
Good for me kind of thing, or
it's extra work. You're not getting paid extra money for it. So I would say, purely from my perspective, the prospect of doing extra hours, extra work but not getting extra pay is not something that I would look forward to.
Because
in any
Rob thought it'd be in Brisbane, you know, escorting the food wagons, and I'm like, hey, anything away from the flagpole is good, but.
I don't think that there is any duty I suppose if you're going to do a ronde, if you're going to be going out and watching the sentries in the middle of the night, that's not something that's rotated, that's occasional, and that's the captain that says, right, I need two rondes to be done tonight, one at 2 a.m. and one at 4 a.m. It'll be Jean and Robert that do this. I doubt Jean and Robert are very happy after a long day to get up in the morning and do it again. Likewise, as a detachment, I suppose, again, a detachment, it's you're chosen to do this. It's not rotated. So it probably shows that they do have some form of, at least a certain opinion of your capabilities, because they would not send out the worst sergeant on a mission, and especially if you're sending them out on a mission where the enemy might be there, or maybe if they're like a forward post on your flank, and if they get turned over and you don't know about it, your line's going to be rolled up. So I suppose in that sense, a sergeant could say, hey, if they picked me, they must think that I am competent. At the same time, if it's like a minor thing, maybe they think, oh, we'll just get Jean. I want Jean out of this garrison. He's a useless sergeant. Hey, there's a patrol. There's a nice patrol duty at this godforsaken village where there's nobody, no chance of anything happening. We'll send him there, gets him out the way. So it's a bit of a yin and yang thing, really. Unlike the soldiers who can make extra money, they can be Batman, like a Batman to their officers, in which case the officer does give money for this sort of job. They can also ask to go outside the garrison to work. So if, for example, you were a mason or a carpenter and you're in a garrison town, you can ask permission to go and work as a mason or as a carpenter. And if you have permission, but you're bringing that money in as well. Sergeants can't, corporals can't, sergeant majors can't. They're really stuck with their own pay. But the pay is significantly better than a simple soldier, so it's worth it.
So we talked a bit about.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
We talked a bit about punishment. There's been a question the opposite way. As far as promoting somebody, are there certain things that person has to have achieved, or is it just that the colonel says, you know, I like Jean, so I'm promoting him from sergeant to sergeant major?
Promotions are internal. The emperor does not decide who's going to be your corporal or your sergeant. Probably your colonel or your chef de bataillon would make that decision based upon what the captains tell him, because the captains are the officers that are closest to these men. It could be as well that you have, for example, in number 1 company, you have 2 really good and promising corporals. And there's a vacancy. Let's say there's a sergeant that's been killed or that's just been transferred to another unit. So there's a vacancy in number 3 company. In that case, let's make use and pick one of these 2 guys to become sergeant in that company. It really is an internal matter for promotion. The only thing that is very important for the men, be they corporals, sergeant, sergeant major, fourier, is they have to be able to read and write because of all the reports they have to do. So that is probably the ultimate discrimination, if I can say that, to become an NCO in the French army and expect promotion. If you can't read, you can't write, I'm afraid you're not going to be, you might become, if you're lucky, one of the number 2 and number 3 eagle bearers. In that case, you get sergeant's pay, but you don't have any duties to do. So, and in fact, that role of guarding the eagle, the 2nd and 3rd eagle bearers were given to soldiers who, by their literacy, could not expect high promotion. It was a way of rewarding good soldiers with high pay, but with no necessity to write reports or read reports. So purely an internal matter, Victor. I've just opened up the discussion window to have a look as well.
Okay, so we have a question there. How do you know, whoops, how do you know if someone is a sergeant or a corporal? That's very easy. I can even answer that one.
Exactly. I think if Victor can lift his arm, you see two woolen. So he is in the guard. So they are yellow.
No, they're gold. So sergeant major. If it was a
you're sergeant major now. Okay, I stand corrected.
If they were a sergeant, there'd only be one in gold.
Yeah, like this.
Yeah.
Okay. If they were a corporal, they'd have two stripes, but just of wool. So, in my case, it would be an orange or orange, two stripes.
Correct.
So that's how you would know your NCOs one from the other.
Yeah. So the corporal is two woolen yellow bars if you're in the line infantry regiment. The sergeant is one metallic golden bar. Sergeant major, two golden bars. And the fourier is...
There you go with the two.
It's a corporal.
Woolen.
There you go. Thank you very much, Peter. That's a corporal for you. I'm wearing a 1790 jacket of the French Army. So even though I'm a sergeant, I have a single bar, as sergeant should have. But this is in white metal, because this time the regiments of France were white with different colored facings. And the silver for for this regiment was for black-faced regiments. The metallic lace was silver. After the revolution, you only had two sorts of regiments. You had line infantry regiments and you had light infantry regiments. Line infantry regiments were always yellow or gold, and light infantry regiments are silver or white.
Sorry, Mark. Thank you very much for your talk. I'm Christian Fernandez. I have a question. I didn't understand quite well how the marron thing worked out. They had, let's say, 5 posts in the round. So they started the round with 5 marrons.
Correct.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when they get to the point, they put in the box 1 marron. But
correct.
How
correct.
do they, and then how do they check at what time they got there? They had to, when they signed, they put the time they were there or not?
No, there is no time. On the register, it's only a signature. It's only a signature. They know what time they went because beforehand, they will say, your roll number 1 is at 1 a.m., roll number 2 is at 3 a.m., roll number 3 is at 4 a.m. They will give you the time to go, but you don't note the time. You are that is interesting.
The sergeant of each round is a different one. So,
sorry?
How if I make 2 rounds, so I make the 11 round and the 1 a.m. round, I cut 10 marrons, number from 1 to 5, 5 for each round. So in the first round, I make both 1 and 5 only, which are the nearest to the starting point. And in the second round, I make 1. When I get to 2, I put 2 marrons, and when I get to 3, I put 2.
No, I understand. No. On the marron, you have a number written on it, 1 and 2. So you always put 1 marron. It's just the number that corresponds. So if you are doing round 1, you will have only marrons with 1 written on them, but you only put 1 marron in each box with the number that corresponds to your round.
You have
okay.
Yeah,
maybe I can rephrase it, make it clear. We assume that there are 6 guard posts that you have to check.
Yes.
And the officer says, Christian, you are going to do round number 3. He is going to give you 6 wooden blocks, each one with a number 3. So when you go around, you put one of your blocks in the first post, you walk to the second post, another block that you have also with a number 3, because it's the 3rd round, you put in his box, and so on. I'm going to do the 4th round. I will have 6 blocks, all with number 4 on them. So when I go around, number 4, number 4, number 4, in the morning, the officer goes through and says, that's funny. I see number 3 went to every post. I see number 4 went to every post. But what happened to number 5? He never went anywhere. He's in
So,
trouble because he took off from camp or he slept and forgot to go on his rounds. So they
Okay.
will know that
Understand that.
Rob was number 5. Rob is in trouble because he didn't do his round.
yeah, I understand that, Victor, but that means that every round is made by a different sergeant.
Yes,
Okay, because if I make round number 1 and round number 2, I can go to 2 posts in the first. In the second.
exactly.
Yeah, you're
But
cheating.
They tried to say that if you have enough sergeants, you say, Christian, you're doing 2 in the morning. Victor's going to do 4 in the morning. Rob is going to do 6 a.m. just before Reveille.
When
And
I
hopefully
made
you
my
have enough
military
sergeants.
service- When I made my military service and we were in the guard, there was only one sergeant who made the round. And so he could cheat if he wanted.
Yeah, you can't cheat. You can't be one sergeant, 2 rounds, and you put the both at the same time so you can sleep. It doesn't work like that. Yeah, 1 round, 1 sergeant. You're
Well,
correct.
thank you. Thank you very much. That's all.
Ganada. Any other questions? Someone asked about a marshal's baton. Who pays for it? The state, or maybe him if he has enough money by that point.
I didn't see that one. Oh, there, no, I missed that one.
I have a question, Mark.
Hi, Jim.
Hello, Jim.
Did sergeants have any role in developing the lieutenants? And that's kind of a modern theme. I'm just wondering if that took place during the time of Napoleon or the Revolution.
Yeah, I think I see what you mean. You mean like somebody that's come out of military school, he's a lieutenant, but he doesn't know anything, and the sergeant sort of give him a hand about how to do things.
Exactly.
There are stories of something similar. One that I remember is it's the memoirs of a young lieutenant who did Saint-Cyr, and he's just come out, so he's a sub-lieutenant, and he joins his regiment. And he presents himself to the colonel of the regiment, but he arrives just when the colonel is doing the cercle d'ordre with every sergeant major of every company of his regiment. So they're all there. And the colonel treats this new lieutenant, sub-lieutenant, with such coldness and disdain that he doesn't understand why. He then explains later on, he found out that the colonel wanted one of his sergeant majors to be promoted to that spot that he's taken. So in essence, it's and he then explains he had quite a hard relationship with the sergeant major within the company he was posted to, simply because everybody thought this guy, this kid that's come out of the academy, who knows nothing, has taken the spot of a sergeant major, maybe with 10 years experience, who would have been made a lot better officer. So there's this sort of animosity between new officers that come out because they are taking spots for not sergeants necessarily, but the sergeant major. The next run on the ladder for a sergeant major is an officer. So how did they teach them? I don't think they taught them, but they probably
Advised them?
Yeah, but you can't advise in a way that you're not actually telling the officer what to do. But yeah, teach the officer, maybe teach him his job, or at least second him as best as you can. It's a delicate thing, isn't it? It hasn't changed much in our modern armies when you get young lieutenants who come in, think they know it all, and they're after the sergeants nowadays. Sort of, are you absolutely sure you want to do it this way, sir? We could do it this way. And so yeah, I think there probably was, but this is purely speculation. I think there probably was that, but there was also incredible resentment that these kids, in essence, were taking places of worthy NCOs to become officers.
There was a good question from Sonia in the fact that were soldiers ever dismissed from the army completely?
Kicked out? Yes. Yes, it can. Yes, there is procedures to kick you out of the army if you are totally useless. However, especially the revolutionary and imperial armies, every man is needed. So if you were a useless, lying son of a gun, and the colonel or your captain wanted shot of you, or you deserted a lot, that was also a thing, and they brought you back. If they couldn't make you into a decent soldier with your regiment, instead of sending you home, in which case you're encouraging everybody else to do it, they would send you to penal battalions. So you would still be a soldier, you would still be doing your duty, but you'd be sent to some god-awful backwater theater. The one that comes to mind is the area around Flushing, Antwerp, that area where you had lots of penal battalions that were there. And these are battalions basically made up of bad men, bad soldiers, but we send them to areas to do garrison duty, or maybe to occupy some swamp-infested island or something like that. So you can get kicked out. There is provisions to, but the fact is that you don't end up getting kicked out. You just get transferred to somewhere worse.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, certainly they didn't look at serving in the Caribbean as a wonderful holiday place to go.
Yeah, but the French Army's involvement in overseas theatre was pretty limited once the Royal Navy had managed to eliminate the naval threat of the French Army. So, but yes, even the British Army soldiers, when they knew they were sent to the Caribbean, it was almost sending them to a death sentence with yellow fever. So, yeah, every army at this point had units that were, yeah, we'd call them penal regiments or penal battalions. Basically, you'd put your bad soldiers there. You couldn't trust them. Okay, fine, we'll put you on some godforsaken island or some backwater theater, and you can rot progressively there if you want. Peter?
Mark, you mentioned a death sentence, and of course, I'm sure everyone realizes that's the quickest way to get out of the army, is to commit a violent enough or a criminal enough offense, and your quick way out would be facing a firing squad and pile an empty hole. So. Yes,
that's another way of getting out. It's probably not the ideal way if you want to carry on with your life afterwards, but yes, that's another one, in a casket. Yeah.
Retreat in the face of the end, or running from the battle, you could very easily be shot then and there.
Yeah,
which
of course,
is why
but if
sergeants were in the back and grenadiers in back rows. The idea being, you turn around, there's a big grenadier there with his bayonet saying, you face forward or you see my bayonet very closely.
And another way to get out of the army, but still have your life intact and not be sent to another backwater theater, is simply to somehow get an injury that's so bad that you can't serve anymore, and then you'll be dismissed as well, and you'll get a pension for that. So maybe lose an arm, lose a leg, get your front teeth taken out, but make sure, if you're doing the latter, make sure that it's genuine, because if the doctors believe you self-mutilated your front teeth, that you can't bite the cartridge, that's a firing squad as well. But if you lose a leg by a cannonball and you survive it, great, you're out of the army. Well done. And you're alive.
Hey, Mark, I want to go into defense of the lieutenants. This is Arden in Texas. Hey,
Yeah.
This is going to sound odd, but I noticed when I did my time that if a person had been an NCO for more than, say, 5 to 6, maybe 10 years, they never shifted their thought processes from the internal taking care of the troops, right?
Mm-hmm.
But where an officer's job is thinking, tomorrow, how am I going to fight this battle? And then they grow up and like, how am I going to fight tomorrow's battle or the battle after that? So it's just a thought. I'm not trying to, it's just something for everybody to think about. It's just, I did notice that when if a person had been an NCO for a very long time and they came over to the officer side of the house, they still thought like an NCL. It was a time factor too. Once they made above a little bit past staff sergeant or past a 3-striper, it was just like, they still worried about, oh, do you got your shoes? You got this stuff, which is not officer business. That's NCO business. And it's just a consideration. So because it's a different kind of thought pattern. Right. It said, yes, you should care about that stuff, but ultimately it ain't your problem. Your problem is tomorrow or the day after, or like, great, is everybody looking good? Is everybody fed tonight? But
I hear what you
is tomorrow and the day after and the day after. So just a thought, everybody.
I hear what you say. I hear what you say. I'm an ex-serviceman as well. I did not serve in the US Army. I served in the French Army. So I do hear and share your sentiment to some of these things. And you are right. What we have to also bear in mind is that our modern military is different to that military that was back then. But having said that, there's just to bring a little bit of, as we say in French, I'm going to bring a bit of water to your windmill. I'm going to support your argument somewhat.
Be my general. I was just trying to, like said, just give it a little different mindset, because we're among friends.
When you see how much money, and Martin Lancaster did a fantastic demonstration of this in his presentation not too long ago. When you see how much a sub-lieutenant, a lieutenant or a captain gets compared to a private soldier or sergeant major, we're not talking like double. We're talking maybe 10 times the amount of money, if my memory serves. It's a huge financial incentive to get up there, especially that remember, we're in a period where also there was no social security, there's no retirement, so this is where you're going to make your money. You got to get up that ladder as fast as you can. Once you get up there, having said that, there are also memoirs that talk of ex-soldiers, ex-NCOs that become officers, sometimes captains, sometimes higher. The one story that comes to mind was I think it was a lieutenant. So he's already gone 2 stages up on the officer's ladder, and he came all the way up from the ranks. But the guy, they said, when you become an officer, you enter also another social class. You can't be that also, from what I heard in the US Army, there is like a social status as well. When you become an officer, you go to certain functions, shall we say, and you mix with different people. Less in the modern French Army, but at this time you did go into a new world and you were expected to act and behave in a certain way. And this particular lieutenant, who was previously a private and worked his way up, he was disliked by not only his subordinates, but he was also disliked by his fellow officers because he still acted like I'm going to use the word, but I don't mean it in any disrespect, like a grunt. The guy was getting drunk every night. The guy nearly killed him. Yeah, we're
all human beings, so it's very hard to let those emotions and attachments go. It was just an observation, and again, since we're all friends here, I was just throwing it out for thought.
No problem. Like I say, you do find examples of that, but the military was a very different place at this point, and despite all the egalitarianism that the French Revolutionary Army spouted, Napoleon's Imperial Army was, once the empire was firmly established, there was a new nobility. There was an imperial nobility. Sons sent to Saint-Cyr, then take up positions. Less and less of the older hands going up through the ranks. It still existed, but there was a lot less of that than the revolution. But I hear what you say, and I agree.
So Mark, I've got 2 questions here.
Yes, please.
One, I'm just reading it there. Okay, so there was a question about were the sergeants involved with the food distribution to the men? And the other question is, wasn't there the ability to retire on half pay sort of as a pension?
Okay, so for the first questions, the sergeants are not present for the food distribution. If we're talking about the military rations, in that case, it is the fourrier, the quartermaster sergeant, who carries this out. He carries this out, but any distribution, whether it's pay, food, wine, anything that's given from the army, the fourrier does it, and it's in the presence of the officier de semaine, the duty officer. He has to be there, and they countersign the paperwork. I distributed this, this, and this to these guys. The officier de semaine reads that. Yep, that's correct, and he countersigns. So it's controlling checks all the time. With regards to the food, the food that's not given by the army, they give you pay. The sergeant gives the pay, the food money to the corporals, and it's the corporals that go out with the men, get the food that's necessary and bring it back and prepare it. And it's the corporal that keeps a little book detailing how much money is received and what's he spent it on. But the sergeants do not get involved in food distribution, no. Except if they're commanding a detachment, in which case he is doing that officier de semaine, or he's supervising what's going on, yes. But otherwise, no. As for the other question, could you just run it past again?
Yeah, the question was, wasn't it possible to retire on half pay, sort of as a pension?
Oh, we're talking sergeants here.
Well, it doesn't say. Was Robin Alexander?
The half pay for when officers retired, yeah, they got half pay. So when sergeants or soldiers or sergeant majors or corporals retired, so they also got a state pension, which was better than nothing. So yeah, you do get paid after you retire from the army, but by retire again, there is the best way to retire from the army is rheumatism. You're too old, rheumatism, get out. You've lost a limb, you're too sick, you're too worn out. That's the best way. But you can't just say, like today, you know what, that 5-year contract, I'm not going to sign out. Or, you know what, I've done this for 3 years. I don't think it's for me, I'm going to go. Once you're in it, especially in the state of war, you're in it until the war is over. Or until you're dead, or until you're invalidated out of the army. But in any case, if you survive, you do get some form of state pension. Yes, the military career at this point was one of the better ways to secure some sort of state pension for your old age. Remember, there is no social security.
If you survive.
Peter? No? Okay. I hope I hope that answers the question about half pay. So half pay is really officers that are fired from regiments. So when, let's take the 1814 French army, huge army, 154, 156 line infantry regiments, where when that 1814 campaign comes to an end, the army is contracted to 90 regiments. So what happens to the men if you follow what the men? Those that are invalidated, rheumatism, missing limbs, too old, worn out, we kick them out. The rest of the men from the regiments that are disbanded and the NCOs, the sergeants and all, the sergeant majors and corporals, they are transferred to the units that still exist. You're not fired, you're transferred. But the officers in charge of those regiments, they are in essence fired. They say, we don't have any postings for you, so we'll give you half your wages, and maybe you'll get a posting, in which case we'll put you on full pay again. But the men don't get half payments. The men just get transferred to a new unit. So you get a pension when you leave, finally, but you don't get half pay as an NCO or a sergeant or a private.
Dane had a
Yeah,
question.
the 1814 retirements. There we go. I've just seen it. So yeah, the 1814 retirements are, yeah, you're retired. In which case you get a pension if you're NCO or private. If you're an officer, in that case, if there's no posting, yeah, you're put on half pay and you're fired.
Dane,
But that will change in 1850.
I have a question. This is Dane from upstate New York.
Hi.
How's it going? I have a question about sergeants, but in this case about sapeurs. Are they spread throughout different units throughout the Grande Armée, or are they basically their own unit set to do a specific task?
Could you just repeat that again? Sappers, did you say?
Sapeurs, yeah.
Les sapeurs. Okay, sapeurs.
Yeah.
Right, sappers, they're 4 guys chosen from the Grenadier Company and attached to the Grenadier Company. So each battalion has 4 of these guys. And within the regiment, you have 1 guy who is designated as their corporal. They are not detached from their parent company. They are administratively, they belong to the Grenadier Company of such a battalion to such a regiment. There are battalions of pioneers, but these are penal battalions. So they're just standard battalions that are with really bad soldiers in them doing really bad things. But sappeurs, no, they're just attached either, I think they're attached to dragoon regiments, light infantry regiments, and line infantry regiments. But they are just part and parcel of the Grenadier Company. They're not units per se.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay.
If that's all the questions, so I'll repeat. If anybody wants to purchase, this is totally separate from the offering a beer to Mark, who I think did a great job. If you want a copy of the presentation and the PowerPoint, then instead of sending an email to or a PayPal to Mark, send me an email, or if you know my email, send a PayPal to my email with a note saying that you want a copy of this presentation. If you want copies of any of the earlier presentations, that's probably best done in an email to me saying I'm really interested in the corporal's talk, or I'm really interested in the
Platoon school or soldier school.
School of the platoon, school of the battalion, or on the talk that Martin gave, which is basically what is a regiment, and it looks at a regiment from a number of different angles, and you get a visual idea of how large a regiment really is compared to a reenacted regiment, which is probably more on the just
yes,
squad level. We just don't have that many people, but it's a fascinating talk. It talks about pay for the different scales. It talks about women and how many women there were in the regiment, children of the regiment, and what the rules were for children. Fascinating. So if you want anything like that, send me an email, tell me what you want. I can work out what the cost is, and I send it to you via WeTransfer app. So even though it might be 2 gigabytes or larger, you still get it. Beyond that, I want to thank Mark especially for a great talk as always.
Thank you.
And if it's a long gap between this talk and the next one, then I might organize just a chat for those who want to go online and talk about whatever things they like. That'll really depend on what my schedule is like, Mark's schedule, or other people who are ready to give presentations. On that note, I'll turn off the recording. Thank you all for spending part of your Saturday, or for those in Australia, part of your Sunday morning with us. I really feel honored to have people from so many countries and actually continents joining in. It's nice to see this family of Napoleonic enthusiasts spread so far across the world. Have a great day. Hope you all stay healthy, and all the best till the next time. Bye-bye.